if it's going to rain, right? We know it's going to rain. And the reality is that someone's like, Chris, you need to be more positive. I'm like, I'm positive it's going to rain. And you know that too. And so instead of going backwards, I want us to chase down progress and start to do things that make sense. You see, we can make mistakes in the past, but I think when we think differently and we put ourselves in a different scenario, what we start to do is to move forward, and the goal is to be wiser. We don't want to repeat those same mistakes anymore. You want to move forward and move forward with confidence. Now, I've also been asked, well, Chris, how do you pick between 3 or 6 months of an emergency fund? That's a very valid question. Here's the deal. The more unstable your income is, that means if you're self-employed or you're a commissioned salesperson or you're a single income household, I want you to rely more on a 6-month emergency fund. So that's money you're going to tuck away, you're going to put it in a money market account and let it sit there. See, the goal is for it to be liquid. Liquid simply means you can get to it when the need arises. Car repair, illness, job change, whatever it is, you've got money tucked away. But if your income is more stable, meaning if you're a dual income household, both of you are working outside of the home or making money, then now you could lean more toward a 3 months emergency fund. But the reality is, you need to hear me. Most people say, well, Chris, that's a lot of money just sitting there, right? Because you need to, if you're doing your every dollar budget, you know how much it takes for you to run your household on. Well, you simply multiply that by 3, right? Or multiply that by 6. So it's not about your income, it's your monthly requirement to take care of your household. See, an emergency fund is insurance, it's not an investment. Okay, now this is a shift and you need to hear me, so I need you all's help. At the count of 3, I want you to say not an investment. You ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Not an investment. That money is insurance. So we just want it to sit there and to be ready whenever you need it. So you don't have that what if scenario. You don't have to get stressed out. You know that that money is sitting there. Now remember, a money market account is where I want you to park it. A money market account is going to give you a better rate of return than a regular savings account. And so any bank, any place where you're doing your checking or savings, they can do a money market account. Now, if you're married, you and your spouse need to identify what's an emergency. Okay, the pizza dude showing up, that ain't an emergency. Okay, the sporting goods shop having a sale, that's not an emergency. And so you actually want to talk about this and to be on the same page. If you're single or newly single, get an accountability partner, somebody in your life that loves you and wants you to be successful. And now you can talk about these things together and you can keep it and keep that money there and keep it prepared to save you if it needs to. Now hear me. This is the one mistake people are making with emergency funds. You've got it sitting there because it's insurance, not an investment, and you need it and you use it. Guess what people forget to do? Build it back up, right? So this is where you shut down everything. And you go, job 1 is to replace that $500 that we needed or that issue that we used it for. And I had a dryer die, okay, a few years ago. That joker died on me, you all. I'm telling you, I had a pair of socks in there drying for 2 days, okay? No, I ain't lying to you. I pulled the sock out. I could have blew on it and dried it faster than this dryer could have. And I shook it and duct taped it and prayed over it. This dryer had shut it down, right? And I remember my initial thought, right, was, oh man, what are we gonna do? And then I went, what do you mean what are we gonna do? We're gonna use the emergency fund because that's why it's there. So job 1 is if you use it, build it back up. Now, as parents, some of us need to learn this full sentence I'm about to teach you. Because have you all figured out kids always want something? Okay, they just do. And listen, I'm about to teach you a full sentence. Watch this. No. Yeah, you just tell them. Tell them no. Right? And my boys, they were the kings of after church wanting to go eat, right? They wanted to go out and eat. And back when we were focusing on the plan initially starting, we used the cash envelopes. And if the envelope was empty, guess what? We didn't go do it. And so we come out of church and they're like, Dad, we want to go to a restaurant and eat. And I'm like, hold on, let me check the envelope. And I'd look in there and I'm like, uh-oh. I go, well, boys, we're going to a new restaurant. And they're like, what's the name of it? I said, it's called Mi Casa. And you should have seen their face. They're like, yeah, we're going to Mi Casa. And my oldest was looking at my middle son like this. You dummy, that means our house. That's true, that is. We're gonna shut that down. Because your emergency fund is not to be used for fun stuff. That emergency fund is in place to protect you. And I'm telling you, if you use the same intensity that you use to get yourself out of debt, you can build this emergency fund up, and I want you to protect it. That means don't let it fritter away. Don't look at it like a vacation fund. It's not a new couch fund. This money is sitting there so when your car acts up, you have a job change or an illness, you don't have to stress. You know this money is sitting there and it's ready to protect you.
So we've had all these huge expenses, but the beautiful thing is that we did not have to incur any additional debt, which is awesome.
To have cash in the emergency fund so that when things happen, because they do happen, to just pay for them, it's like, wow, that's crazy.
We have our emergency fund, and it's like we just really got our car back a couple weeks ago, and I didn't even think about it. I was like, we took our time getting the car to the shop because it just wasn't that big of a deal.
We got our full emergency fund, and literally the next day, Murphy came to visit. So it got knocked down by about $4,000 or something. It was painful, but that's why it's there.
At the end of the day, if I lose my job tomorrow, I'm gonna be okay. And I think before, I may have been scared to speak up and to say certain things because I needed my job. I don't feel that way now.
We got a tenant to do over $15,000 worth of damage to a house. But we had the cash set aside to do that. We're going to be fine.
Now we're sitting here, we have our 6 months emergency fund, which is really nice to have because that's a great cushion. That afforded me to be able to stay off of work for 5.5 months with my baby.
He got laid off, and it wasn't this big panic. It wasn't this big like, oh my gosh, where are we gonna move? What are we gonna do? And he got a job offer right away, and he was even able to say to them, I need to decompress a little bit. Do you mind if I don't start for 2 or 3 weeks?
Things that we thought were not for us or that, we could not have or only rich people got that or I don't know, whatever these things that you tell yourself, we see that if you work hard, if you commit to it, you can accomplish it.
The peace of mind you get is it's just overwhelming.
We've now gone through 3 lessons. And in the next lesson, we're going to cover baby steps 4 through 7. Now, I know many of you are still on baby steps 1 or 2. And a life without debt and having some money in the bank seems like a long way off. But I don't want you to get defeated because baby steps 4 through 7 are where you really begin to change gears. It's where you move from right now to where you want to be. This next lesson is where you get to look towards your future, set some goals, and see how all the sacrifices that you're making right now are going to change your financial life. I want you to hear me. Your future is in your hands. You get to decide. It's up to you. Now, I know you've been working hard, but hear me. Keep it going. It's going to be worth it. This next lesson is where you get to start dreaming about the future you really want. Now it's time for your 1-minute takeaway. Write down one thing you're going to do this week based on what you just learned. What's your 1-minute takeaway?
All right, guys. Okay, so I really like that one because it really takes the time and it breaks down why are you building up the emergency fund. Now, here are some things that Chrissy and I learned as we went through this process. So, number 1, This is the least fun step in the entire process. As you go through and you're saving your $1,000 up, you've never done that before, it's pretty wild. Baby step 2, you start paying off debt, and it's fun and it's exciting, and you make that last payment on your car, and it's like unbelievable. And then you make your way to baby step 3, and it's just you're building this wall brick by brick by brick by brick by brick, and you start losing the excitement that you gain throughout the other steps of becoming, becoming peace, or gaining peace with your finances is probably the better way to put it. So one thing that I have to encourage you with is that you have to understand that, number one, especially if you're a male, now there are exceptions, but generally speaking, if you're a male, this is going to be the hardest step for you because you're still not investing yet. Remember, at least for me, I was very excited about investing. And as I went through and we learned about compound interest in the previous lessons, I realized that it doesn't really take a lot of money invested each month to where, I would be able to retire with, $100,000, $200,000, like a serious amount of money. But my challenge was that I couldn't start investing until the emergency fund was funded. So you have to use that emergency fund as that final hill. And as you make it over that step, as you get that emergency fund funded, then you can begin really starting taking big, giant chunks away at you can start paying your house off earlier. Most people who participate in FPU have their house paid off in about 8 years. Which many people who start FPU, if they would have not taken the steps, it takes them usually 20 to 30 years to pay off a loan. If you follow the steps, you pay it off substantially faster. This was a really, really challenging step. But once you have your emergency fund funded and built, that's when you get to see what happens when something like coronavirus comes around. Everyone else is running around like a crazy person, and you are taking a deep breath and you're saying, okay, I've got money in savings. I can survive for 3, 4, 5, or 6 months, depending upon whatever happens in the economy. I'm not going to be waiting on a government payout. I'm not counting on a check in the mail. I'm going to be okay. And that's where the emergency fund becomes incredibly powerful. If you're right now uncomfortable because of this coronavirus thing and it's kind of got you thinking, oh man, I really wish I had been better prepared. That is what should motivate you as you get to this step in the baby steps. Because when you make your way to this step, so let's say, for example, you had $1,000 in debt payments each month. Those are all paid off. Okay? And by debt payments, I mean a credit card, maybe 2 car payments, right? It's really easy to make that number $1,000. So let's say that you've paid off you've paid off all of those things. And now each month coming into the house, you have $1,000 coming in. That $1,000 per month is what you stack up to build your emergency fund, depending upon what your expenses are. Right? And the good news is you've already done a budget, so you already know what your monthly expenses are. But if you don't, that's kind of how you figure it out. How much money does it cost to run the household? What is that? Is it $2,000? This is just to pay the rent, to buy groceries, to pay all the bills. What is that number for you? Is it $2,000? Is it $3,000? Find out what that is, and you multiply it by the number of months. So for some people, that might mean if you've got a large house payment, that might be $3,000 to $4,000 a month. And if you don't have friends nearby, if you don't have a place to go, and if something crazy were to happen, you really might need 6 months in there. So if you're talking about, that's $15,000 to $18,000 in an account that you're not investing, that you're not doing anything, and you're just building it brick by brick by brick by brick, slowly, 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 slowly. It is not fun. It took us longer to build our emergency fund than it did to get out of debt. Why? Because it's not exciting. It just isn't. So I would encourage you. I know that obviously it can be done. People are doing it. Millions of people are following this program, and they're able to get out of debt by following the principles that are discussed in the program. But I just want to encourage you, and I want to really be totally clear and transparent. The least fun you'll have in this entire process is building up the emergency fund. But when an emergency comes, that's when you take a big deep breath. That's when you're like right now, that's when you're breathing a breath of fresh air while everyone else is running around. And that's not how God calls his people to live their lives. God does not want us to run around panicking like a chicken with our head cut off because there's a virus that's taking over. Or it could be anything else. It could be the loss of a job. It could be a car broke down. It could be a big something that affects your home that requires a lot of money, maybe a septic tank. There's so many different things that can happen to your finances that can completely take you off track. But if you've got the money set aside into an emergency fund, that is your protection. Okay, so I haven't seen too many questions come in the chat. I'm just going to kind of wrap up over the next few minutes. If you have questions about any of the baby steps so far, if you have questions about Financial Peace University, I encourage you to post those in chat. I can see all the chat messages that have come in so far, and I can see additional messages that if you want to send them within the next few minutes. We'll definitely take a few moments and discuss those. So, baby step 3, 3 to 6 months of expenses in an account that you can access at all times. Key. It's not going to be very fun, but it is absolutely critical to have this wall up between you and whatever's going to affect you financially. One thing that I found is once we built the wall up, things don't even, it's not an issue. If every now and then you might have, the car needs new tires, and we weren't prepared for that. So you dip into the emergency fund, and then you refill it back. So that's really what I found to be the power of Financial Peace University is as you go through, you are whether you're working by yourself or if you're working with a spouse, the key is that you can direct and focus your money in whatever bucket it needs to go into. So if you're noticing that as you go through baby step 1, that's what you and your significant other or you were able to do. You were able to, number 1, focus with gazelle intensity, put that money in that account and not touch it. And then as you got yourself out of debt, you took your money and you just kept pointing it in those different areas. You put it in your credit card, and then you paid off your credit cards, and then you paid off your car, and then you paid off your student loan, smallest to largest. After all of that is done, you then take that same amount of focus, that same amount of gazelle intensity that he talks about in the video, and you apply that to this emergency fund. Once that's done, on the other side of that hill, and it is definitely a hill, once you make your way to the other side of that hill, that's when you get to start investing. And that is one of the most exciting things that you can do, especially right now, because if you've got the emergency fund built, right now, when the stock market's going crazy, everybody's freaking out. Oh my gosh, I need to sell my stock so that I don't lose it. I haven't touched anything, and I haven't had to because the emergency fund is in place. This is why you don't invest first. A lot of people say, I want to save money so that I can invest. Well, you have to make sure that you have that emergency fund in place before you start really investing. Because if you've got, 25% of your finances are going into your 401k, and then your 401k bottoms out, then you've lost a lot of money. And if you need that money and you start pulling it out, you're going to be pulling out money that you really don't have. And maybe when you bought those stocks, those mutual funds, maybe they were at $100 to $200 a share, and you're selling them at $125 or $75 a share. You're losing that money. And unfortunately, if you don't have that strong system in place, that emergency fund, that 3 to 6 months of emergency fund, you're really setting yourself up. You're almost asking for something bad to happen. So I think we'll go ahead and close. I had one question, but it's not really relevant from Jimmy. If you guys are in chat and you see Jimmy's question, you're welcome to answer that one. But I think we should pray and we'll go ahead and wrap up for tonight. Father God, thank you for this time. God, we thank you so much for all the people that are really looking to you for leadership and guidance in their finances. God, we thank you that your word is alive and it empowers us to make decisions so that we can live with financial peace. God, we love you, we praise you, and we thank you for all you are. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining at the Blues Cruise Online group tonight.